Welcome once again to our Zero Trust webinar, Transforming Cybersecurity. Now over to your moderator, John Roby.
Hey, welcome to DAU, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. This is our third in a monthly Zero Trust webinar series we've started, and it's been wildly popular. I think today I heard we almost 1,000 people registered, which is extraordinary. Again, my name is John Roby. I also go by JR. I'm a DAU faculty member and prior program manager and your moderator for today. As a former program manager of communications and IT systems, I was always keenly interested in any new developments and requirements related to cybersecurity that I needed to consider for my programs. And if you're new to the topic, Zero Trust is the foundation of our DoD security transformation to counter major cybersecurity threats. Using the three core DoD documents, DoD Zero Trust Strategy, the DoD Zero Trust Reference Architecture, and the DoD Zero Trust Capability Roadmap, DoD program offices will be responsible for developing Zero Trust implementation plans. Today's webinar is intended to raise your awareness of these constructs for your DoD Zero Trust implementation plans. Today we're joined by Dr. Paul Shaw. Welcome, Paul. He's going to help us better understand the Zero Trust, the DoD's core Zero Trust documents as applied to ZT implementation plans. Dr. Shaw is a colleague of mine. He's also, we worked together when he was the Naval Technical Authority for Program Manager for the Navy Data Environment. He's also a fellow retired naval aviator. Paul spent many tours. He kept getting recalled. I guess he couldn't get it right. Recalled to active duty and included service in Afghanistan. Currently, he works with acquisition commands to evaluate system security engineering and threat-based engineering. He also has a Doctor of Science in Cybersecurity and 25 master's degrees. No, I'm just kidding. He has 5 master's degrees. Might as well be 25 at some point, Paul. Why stop at 5? I guess when you get your PhD, maybe you're kind of done with the master's things. But Paul is clearly an expert in cybersecurity at the highest of levels, and we look forward to having a discussion with him today. The format for today is approximately 30 minutes of Paul talking to us about what Zero Trust means to you. And then we'll have 30 minutes or so reserved for Q&A via chat. And we did have some questions sent in advance, and Paul very graciously has spent time to integrate many of those questions into his presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Dr. Paul Shaw. Paul, over to you,
well,
sir.
JR, thank you for that wonderful welcome, and it was always a pleasure to work with you in the past. I'm going to turn off my camera just so I save the bandwidth, because I've gotten kicked out twice, and I'm hoping not to get kicked out again. This presentation today is up. It's got a PDF link on the site if you want to see the slides, have the slides. It is distribution statement A, so please, it's public release. You're more than welcome to do whatever you want with it. And I have links in here for the things I'm showing. If you can go to the next slide. You know, I wanted to go back to a very successful thing that we did in the Navy with Admiral Rickover, the nuclear Navy. And it was a wonderful program, but Admiral Rickover really understood how many different things had to get integrated together to really make the nuclear Navy a success. And I have this wonderful quote from Admiral Rickover when he was testifying on why they had been so successful and what it was needed. And, you know, if I took what we're trying to do in Zero Trust and what he did in nuclear engineering, you'd find a lot of similarities in the fact that it needs to be an integrated effort. So if you can go to the first slide, please, the next slide, please. So, you know, when I've been working with different program offices now and COCOMs and services on what they do on Zero Trust, we have some excellent success stories. And in the DOT&E's annual report to Congress, the link's down there for you, that just came out in January, they've actually been out assessing some of the efforts that the DoD has had at the COCOM level and the service levels for Zero Trust. And the report already is showing that when the different commands implement these Zero Trust principles, it significantly improves our ability to fight through cyber attacks and accomplish our critical missions. I'm going to talk a little bit about this some more, this DOT&E report, but it is making a difference, and we are seeing that difference in actual assessments, cybersecurity assessments already. Next slide. So I'll start off by saying in the strategy, there's some strategic assumptions that end up being a core part of what we're trying to do. And we have a complex security threat that are persistent. Zero trust, and I'm going to keep emphasizing, is not just technology. There's a lot of other aspects to it, especially the culture. It requires a rethinking of how we've done things. It's going to require a collaboration across quite a few groups. It really needs us to understand what effect it has on the mission owner and how it affects our enterprise services, and how we can get to a risk-based response, real-time response. But there's going to be a lot of challenges, especially with our legacy IT. And if you're in the program office working on a zero trust strategy, you're going to continually need to keep educating your leadership and the operators on what this means. If you can go to the next slide, please. By the way, those links should work. But when I go out to these different groups and I'm meeting with them and talking to them and seeing what they're doing and how they're doing it, what I keep seeing is that zero trust at the end of the day requires three things to be integrated together. You need to do good system security engineering. You need to understand the threat, because that could affect what you're going to do and continue to do in zero trust. And it needs to be integrated into your cyber operations. You can't just suspect what you've done to the MOCs, TOCs, NOCs, all these operations centers, to automatically understand what it meant and what's expected of them and what you're going to do for them and how you're going to work together. Just an observation, and again, getting back to what I already mentioned in the DOT&E reports, the key to success and the key to the significant difference was that integration with the cyber operations. My observation so far in talking to various program offices is I'm seeing good security engineering, but I'm not seeing the same level of understanding the threat and using the threat tactics, and then in the integration with the operations. This has got to be a three-legged stool to be successful. If you only have one leg, you're missing the other two. If you go to the next slide, please. So again, out of the DOT&E report, and this was public open source, of course, and the link's down there, it talked about the fact that for the zero trust to work effectively, it had to be integrated with the cyber operations. And without that integration to the cyber operations, the effects of the technology, the effects of the process, we didn't achieve what we were trying to achieve. We didn't get the effect of the money, the time, and the effort that we spent. So if you can go to the next slide. So how ZT works, real basic, is that we're treating all users inside the perimeter as a potential threat. And that could be another user, that could be a device, that could be a system. So we have a wide variety of things that we're trying to identify and understand what access and how we properly authenticate and authorize them for what they're going to do. The construct of zero trust is we're only going to allow them the bare minimum of the functionality of the access control that they need to perform their job. And that what we have to have a better understanding is the users, the components, the capabilities for how we're going to do identity management, access management, application authentication, the segmentation, and then use the threat intelligence effectively. What our objective is, as we increase our capability to better counter a more advanced threat, is we want to minimize the effect to the user experience. So we always have this balance as we're working through these implementation plans, and I'll talk about what an implementation plan is here shortly. Is how do we do this without sacrificing that user experience? Next slide. Yes, these slides should be advancing. And again, what I have throughout and at the end is various links for you to help with sources that should help you develop your zero trust plan. By the way, zero trust is not being done by the DoD, it's being done by the entire federal government. And I realized looking through the personnel that attended today, we have quite a few people from other agencies, which is wonderful. So we're all working together on this. There's a lot of good guidance that's been coming out from other agencies like GSA, and I know DHS, CISA is doing some wonderful work also on advancing the science in the field of zero trust. So all of us are trying to use similar pillars, similar constructs A wonderful thing that I really like and I advise is the GSA Zero Trust Buyer's Guide. I thought that was a wonderful document and gives some great advice, and I'll refer a little bit back to that as we go forward. Next slide, please. So, our core concept, and what I always remind people to start with, is what is your mission outcome? You're going to be assuming a hostile environment. You're going to be presuming breach. You're going to end up going into a lot more granularity as far as your device, your user, your assets. Everybody always says start from the inside out. So start with the core asset you're trying to protect, and then understand the effect as you build this out, and continue to develop and test this as you go forward. Now, I realize I have a picture here where I'm starting to show the development of the policy enforcement points, which is the brains integrating these sources together. And if you're interested, we go into this a lot more depth than I'm going to be able to go into this session that we have just here. But what we've gotten to is that we no longer trust implicitly. We're verifying trust at almost any transaction. We can get more and more granular on that. And we're using a lot of various sources coming together in an unified analytics to better detect threats, whether it be an insider or an external threat. And we always are advancing where we expect to go with the automation and orchestration of these technologies and these processes, and how our operation centers can better understand and counter, again, a more advanced threat. So if you go to the next slide. What I've found is that there's three core things that come together. We have to understand the architecture that you currently have, the designs that you currently have in place. You really need to review your stakeholder requirements and understand these new emerging requirements and what they're going to do if you want to minimize the impact of the user. And you need to translate this into better security requirements. So in the programs that I see that are being more successful, I see elements of all three of these coming together. And these are your core implementation themes. Next slide. So, what I always end up starting off with is it's not just an IT solution. And there's a lot of products out there that now are using zero trust as a marketing element and talking about zero trust and implementing elements of zero trust. But it's more than just buying a product or buying a solution. It's integration into your processes. It's understanding how it affects everything that you do in your workflows. So again, to get back to this, you have to go beyond just thinking that I'm going to buy something and be done. You have to understand that this is going to impact your processes. This is going to impact the way that you do things. This is going to impact the workflows. Next slide. So we have these three core documents that were mentioned, and these are the core reference documents for your implementation plan: the zero trust strategy, the capability execution roadmap, and the reference architecture. Now, these are all public open source. I have links for these at the end if you want to. Well, you should be using these three core documents. I guarantee you they will probably continue to evolve. I got it. But this is the starting point. This is what will frame up the core high-level concepts. And this will also frame up what capabilities that we're trying to put into this implementation plan. Next slide. So in the zero trust strategy, when they talk about executing this, when they talk about creating an implementation plan, they really talk about four core elements. The cultural adoption, which this type of outreach and awareness training is part of that first thing, where we're helping people understand what it is. We get to the what we're going to do across the user, the device, the application, the data, the network, how we're going to use visibility and automation. We get to understanding what capabilities, what effect it has on the architecture, what interoperability between other systems is going to mean in this. And then we get to the enablement aspects: policy, program planning, budgeting. All of these things have to come together for this to be effective. Next slide, please. So in the strategy, we have an evolving construct. Now, I wish I had templates that are publicly open source that I could share out. I will say this, that there's some wonderful work occurring at acquisition commands, at the COCOMs, at the different DoD CIO offices. There are some differences between how the commands are are approaching this, and context does matter. But you are responsible, if you're in a DoD program office, for developing one of these implementation plans. I would advise you to start with your chief engineers and your technical directors and your PEOs for what they might want in their plan, because I've found some differences between services and acquisition commands, and that's perfectly viable, because there will be some differences in what occurs. But what the DoD overall is going to be measuring at the service level is how the program offices are actually getting to the achievement of the capabilities I'm going to show that would be in your implementation plan. And they are measuring the overall department's progress. Next slide. And I am monitoring chat, so yes, all these documents are at the DoD Chief Information Officer, the core documents. And this goes to a much deeper level than might have been in some of the things that you've done before, like your authority to operate and authority to connect. Now, the core 45 capabilities are listed here. And in the current strategy and the current capability roadmap, we have 45 what we call capabilities. These are the things listed on here that are capabilities. And under these 45 capabilities, there's 152 activities. The best place to see this at a more granular level, of course, is in the capability roadmap. So when we start talking about you creating an implementation plan, you're going to be creating a plan of how your program is going to be executing and maturing yourself. And this is going to be an iterative thing. This is not just a one and done in these, but an iterative cycle of what it means for your program to do these various capabilities and these sub activities. If you can go to the next slide. I did want to mention that there's a lot of great work out there on Zero Trust. And when people talk about capabilities, you will find some variance. There's probably an 80-90% overlap overall between what different programs are putting out. Like I highlight that MITRE did a wonderful report on Zero Trust architectures. They've done some phenomenal work for us, but they have a slightly different description of some of the capabilities than we might have in our strategy, which is fine. The ones that you're going to be responsible in your implementation plan, if you're a DoD program office, of course, is what we have in our strategy. But these other documents are very well thought out. They have great guidance. And again, they can help us with best practices. The other thing I highlight, if you go to the next slide, is that pretty much all of the major vendors, and I'm just highlighting one of them with Microsoft, have done a great job of embracing Zero Trust. So whether you're talking Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all of them are using Zero Trust constructs, Zero Trust architecture, Zero Trust capabilities. Again, there might be slightly different ways that they've defined it and how they're using it. So again, this is where you're going to work through in your implementation plan if you're adopting something from like Microsoft, what it means to you and how you've satisfied the DoD requirements for the capabilities and the activities that you're responsible for. By the way, some of these major vendors like Microsoft are doing a wonderful job of working with us, looking at our documentation, incorporating our constructs into their material, their constructs. So there's a lot of great feedback occurring, but again, you're responsible for what we have in the DoD Zero Trust strategy and the capability roadmap. So you will have to do some translation between these other groups. Next slide, please. So when we talk to the implementation plan, what we have is in the strategy, this initial concept of a target level for the Zero Trust capabilities. And what you're responsible for over the next couple of years is understanding where you're at, understanding what you're going to do, and understanding how you're going to achieve the different deltas as you work through the engineering, your workflow, your processes, how this is going to affect your operations, how this affects your users. We realize that there's going to be investments and costs in this. We also realize that this is going to be an evolution of what you've done and how you do it. And that you could be given a higher level of threat as you proceed, which would affect, again, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. The nice thing is you create these capabilities, as you implement these capabilities and these activities, you're creating the ability to handle a higher level threat and better understand what it would mean to you if you have to go to a higher level threat. Now, what we're talking about is over the next 5 years that you'll achieve the targeted levels of ZT. And oh, by the way, there could be some programs that we find that we don't want to spend the money, time, and effort, and we might retire. That's not atypical, and that is a viable thing. You know, we are not going to implement these capabilities and activities. We're going to instead retire this. And by the way, I see in chat that there's some wonderful comments. Yeah, there's all sorts of different vendors that are putting out different things that would help, different tools. You are responsible for understanding how those fit, what they do, and if they're the right ones for you. Context is king here. Next slide, please. So again, in the capability roadmap, one of the 3 core documents, what you're going to find is that they're further detailed, they're further drilled down on how these capabilities relate to the activities. And you will find that a great starting point for every program that I know that's been working through this program office, COCOM, service, is the DoD CIO Zero Trust Program Office has done a wonderful job of starting to understand what's the predecessor and what's the relationship between some of these activities. Now, again, you might need to tailor that some, which is what's expected, but it's a great starting point for you to take the capability roadmap and understand these capabilities and these activities to a much more granular level and start outlining the dependencies and interdependencies that occur in these different areas. I see that people talking about baseline of security. You're right. There is a baseline of security that is occurring. That's why in these efforts, I always advise you to look at what your chief engineer, your technical director is putting out at your particular command, because I'm seeing more and more emergence at the acquisition command level, at the DoD CIO level, where they're further refining this and they're understanding some of the nuances and lessons learned and best practices in how these capabilities and these activities will proceed. Next slide. So I was asked in the questions before this, is there a progression of the capabilities? And I would highlight in the DoD reference architecture, we have a construct, and this is still notional, of what is the maturity level across these capabilities, what would be expecting to see and understand as you proceed. I will say that this will continue to evolve as we have more and more programs working together to implement these capabilities in their particular program office. We will start seeing more and more emergence of best practices. If you want an overview of Zero Trust, by the way, we have a wonderful symposium on April 4th and 5th that was advertised and is free, which is between DAU, MIT, the Cloud Security Alliance, the Software Engineering Institute, and other wonderful partners. We're all trying to help you not only understand this, and then we're looking at a June session where we're having the chief engineers and the security architects of the different acquisition commands to come together to further refine what these capabilities mean to them, what the different maturity levels of these capabilities and what we expect of them as we implement them and work them into our processes. Next slide. So in the strategy, what you find as we work through your portfolio, because not everything in your portfolio will transition. Some of these things may be ending up being retired. We find 3 broad courses of action. We call them COAs. We look at our legacy stuff that we're going to transform. And I've seen throughout the chat that people are describing in the questions, there was all sorts of questions on, should this go to Zero Trust, or can Zero Trust affect this? And this is the type of stuff that we're going to be working through for actually quite a few years. We have some wonderful efforts, again, from the commercial cloud, Microsoft, Azure, Google, I don't want to leave any of them off, are doing some wonderful work with us, and they're understanding how these different capabilities will assist us in the achievement of our zero trust goals and objectives and achieve our capabilities. By the way, I will say this, with all the wonderful work from any of these, whether it be Microsoft, Google, Amazon, there's always a shared responsibility between us and them. And that's one of the key things that I find, again, in the operations plan that I expect you to work through. And then, by the way, we have some wonderful efforts where the government, we internally in the DoD are designing different instantiations of zero trust. I had the honor and privilege of seeing what NSA has been doing with their native zero trust cloud at the Dreamport in Columbia, Maryland, and I was just in awe of the wonderful work that's occurring there and how they're understanding to put these capabilities and really help us achieve a better way to counter these. By the way, the link for the Ford free seminar is going to be advertised at the beginning. We'll be sending that out, and it was shown at the beginning of this. Next slide. I'm reading the chat as we go through or monitoring it. So in the programs that I've talked to, the biggest challenge of these implementation plans tends to be the legacy system. And one of the things that you're always going to have to understand or work through is, are you going to even take that piece of legacy through the zero trust retrofit? Some programs we've already found would be so cost prohibitive that it's more effective to go to a newer design, or the newer design that we were looking for cloud migration would work very well for that. So one of the things I always realize that people struggle with is how I best do portfolio management for these efforts. Next slide. So, you know, again, some legacy systems will not be transitioned. What's expected if they're not transitioning, that you're going to have an expected retirement date on them. I know people are a little bit frustrated that there's not a standardized template, but there really is variances between services and acquisition command. So what I would advise is start with your own acquisition command, your own COCOM technical leadership, your own service CIO's guidance for the templates and the overlays that they're using, and see if they have a specific format. Unfortunately, there's not a format that anybody's allowed me to share in a public forum, but when I do my 2-day workshops where we go into more detail on these things, I do have examples of formats. There's going to be a progression of these capabilities and activities, and the DoD Zero Trust Portfolio Management Office under the DoD CIO will be monitoring the progression on the achievement of the capabilities, how people are progressing towards the baseline target that we see emerging and is initially defined in the 3 core documents. There are dependencies and interdependencies for these capabilities, so that capability roadmap is going to be critical to you to understand those dependencies and interdependencies between these capabilities and activities. And one of the things I always tell people is, and it's absolutely critical to realize, is this is going to be an iterative process. So don't expect to just do this once through and be done. This is going to be an ongoing effort that we're going to continue to incorporate into our engineering, our management of the countering of the threat in our cyber operations going forward. Next slide. When I see people that are being successful, what they've done is they've integrated the other things that they're doing for security. They understand what they've done for cyber hygiene. They understand what security controls they've done, what cyber hardening. They're aware of what architecture they have. And next month, we have the director from the DoD CIO's Office of Architecture and Engineering, Mr. Director Borshine, here next month to talk about how Zero Trust integrates with the cybersecurity reference architecture. And they recently published a new document. So a follow-on to this next month will be the further development of architecture with the director of security architecture and engineering out of the DoD CIO's office. How you do your boundaries and segmentation. By the way, I can quickly get a feel for where you're at in your zero trust by just understanding your segmentation strategy, what you're doing for resilience. These are the plan factors that affect this. Next slide. So there are wonderful documents from NIST. I'm going to show you two of them. One is the Zero Trust Reference Architecture, the 800-207 core reference document that we've used extensively. They talk about this not being a single architecture, but a guiding principle for our workflow, our system design, our operations. I emphasize all three. This is an ongoing journey, but we really have to evaluate our risk to emission and how we can maximize our effect to counter threat without really affecting our users' ability to do their job. If you go to the next slide, by the way, NIST has done a wonderful job of creating a Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. They're helping us out on various things. They're helping us do these symposiums and providing wonderful information to us. They've put out a series of publications in the 1800 series where the Cyber Center of Excellence and what they're learning, how they're putting this together, and how we can come to the best overall practice of making these investments, balancing our priorities, integrating these technologies with their various levels of maturity so that we can minimize the impact to our user, but maximize the effect of how we can counter a more advanced threat. Next slide. So, we're going to have to accommodate many things as you work through your implementation plan: users, devices, service, applications, access requests, data objects. We're going to have to understand our legacy applications, and many of them weren't designed to especially counter lateral movement. We're going to be converting systems, so there is going to be a lot of technical debt, and this will take time and effort. There could be some significant investments, again, in the capability and infrastructure. And from an acquisition perspective, I hope you can balance the trade-off of what we're doing and how we're doing it. By the way, when you start achieving these capabilities, the threat's going to move on. So that's why this becomes iterative, and it can be difficult to maintain what we're going to call compliance. It's going to be a moving target. Next slide. I have here, and this is just in working with various programs, what I call some of the implementation challenges. I realize that our guidance is very high level, and you need to translate this into what you're going to do for your outcomes. I realize our threat intelligence and warnings can be difficult to translate to your system. By the way, you're still going to be needing to correct the vulnerabilities in your programs that you already are aware of as you go forward in this, and that your threats are co-evolving and intelligent. So these are the things that I typically find. I'm sure many of you, if you look through this list, you're going to relate to it and go, oh my gosh, you just talked about me in my program office. By the way, if you find one in particular that is affecting you, please email me. I love to get your feedback and responses on this. Next slide. So, I've come up with my core, what I call engineering straights, core questions that I've helped people work through. I start off with their current level of access control. What are they doing? Least privilege, ABAC. Are they doing some type of policy enforcement point already? Can they change their architecture in the design? Can they change their interface, their configurations? Can they manage their interfaces? If you use this, you'll find this is a great starting point to work through on your implementation plans. These are the questions that you're going to have to work through on these capabilities and activities. Next slide. This is going to be a redesign of our architecture and our constructs, and this will affect your workflow. This will affect your operations. This will affect how you're doing authentication, and I realize all of this is evolving. So that's why this is an iterative effort, and it's going to be a significant effort and on how we go forward on our portfolios, our systems, our developments. Next slide, please. Again, referring back to the Zero Trust reference buyer's guide from GSA, they talk about that there's a lot of people out there claiming that they're doing Zero Trust offerings, and it really does require good engineering. I will say I've seen the same thing that GSA saw. In fact, I got the next slide. Go ahead to it. That some people have been misrepresenting where they're at, the maturity of their technology. Sorry to tell you that there's people out there that will tell you something that's not true, but I know last year at Black Hat, pretty much every vendor had some type of zero trust in their marketing that was talking about zero trust. And not everything's to the same level of maturity, not everything's to the same level of progress and granularity. So, we do have to be an informed buyer as we buy these products and we work with our different vendors. Next slide. So, again, it comes back to good engineering. I've had programs, weapon systems, and other things say, this could be a safety critical issue. I have critical timing, availability, integrity. And I go, okay, we need to abstract the way where we're going to do zero trust, and we're not going to interfere with anything that's safety critical. We've already been looking at this in various critical infrastructure programs. I like to start with where you're at in your segmentation strategy. Do you have a macro segmentation strategy? Have you gone to micro segmentation? Those are both listed capabilities that you'll be working through in your implementation plans. The other thing too is I've found that the more progression people have done in their cloud migration to going cloud native, the easier it is to adopt these capabilities and these technologies to be more effective. And as you're doing this, you've got to continually keep working with your leadership to inform them on what you're doing, what it means, how you can have higher mission assurance and be more effective. Next slide. So don't overly focus on the technology. We're not doing this just for technology's sake. We have to understand the technology as an enabler as we go forward in these capabilities and the activities. We need to create a policy framework across our policy, our architecture, our shared services to really get to good ZT implementation. And you're going to find some things will go into your fast lanes. I've already found some people that are merging what they're going to do for zero trust with what they're doing in cloud migration. I would consider that a best practice and a very good thing to be considering. Next slide. So integrate your zero trust efforts with your other cybersecurity disciplines, what you're doing for your risk management framework, for your authority to operate, your authority to connect, what you're doing for cyber resiliency, what you're doing for cyber test and evaluation. Make sure you understand what sensitive information or sensitive assets you're trying to protect, because we want to build out from that. We want to conduct trade-off analysis as we integrate these capabilities and activities. And we want to make sure that as we're understanding these capabilities and activities, we're translating them back into our system security requirements. One thing, by the way, I'm still finding, and I always remind people, is I'm starting to see really good work, but I always remind them to make sure that they put in their program office, their POM, their budget submissions, that they incorporate not just the buying of the technology, but the incorporation into the processes, and that translates this back to the cyber ops. So another area I'm still seeing as you work through your plans is understand the financial impacts and make sure you're putting in budget requests for this. Next slide. So I have here some core reference documents for you that I think are a great starting point for you to work through your implementation plans. And if you go to the next slide, I have some links for you of good reference sources to go. And with that, I'd like to get it back to some of your questions. I've seen some wonderful questions in chat, and I know there was some great questions submitted that we've just started to discuss. So, JR, you can go to the last slide.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Paul. That's a really comprehensive overview of zero trust and the many, many considerations people need to, at a minimum, start thinking about. Is kind of what I heard was, if you're unfamiliar with this, there's lots to work through. Lots of things need to change, I think, is the message as well, that it's going to take some time to get there, and people just need to be intentional and deliberate, it sounds like, in plotting out their strategy for their program. One of the questions, and I'll do my best, everybody, to kind of pick and choose what's out there. One question that came early in chat was, and I wondered this too when I was doing the training on zero trust, from the user experience, what's in the future, what's going to be different with zero trust? I mean, there was chatter. What kind of got me going, the theme was, there's talk about single sign-on and CAC-enabled systems that we're all very comfortable with now. What's different in the future from the user experience on Zero Trust?
Well, one of the things I think that users are going to be surprised with, and we've got to make sure we've educated them on, is that the environment they're in could affect their access. So, currently we always think about access being uniform, and we don't consider that our location, the endpoint that we're using, we just always assume we're going to have the same access in all environments. So if I'm traveling abroad and I'm a user under Zero Trust, and it knows that my endpoint is outside of the continental US, my access capabilities, my ability to use applications is going to be very different. So I think the first thing is we're going to have to start educating our consumers on context matters, where you are, what device you're on, what endpoint you're using, the environment you're in, is going to affect your access to data, to programs, to applications in this new environment. So we do need to educate users that there is going to be a difference for access and authenticate or authorization. And context of where they're at and what they're doing and what device they're using is going to be very important going forward.
So it's kind of it depends kind of answer. It what system it is, and like you said, where it goes in the broader architecture might require additional system verification validation. Is that a
absolutely? So
okay.
As we evolve Zero Trust, what we're doing is we're taking more and more information. And really contextual information. What system am I accessing from? Where am I accessing from? What am I doing? What have I done previously? And those are all coming into an access decision. Now, in the future, what we're going to have is all of these different policy enforcement points, policy decision points, integrating all this information in a new dynamic way. So, I as a user, I could be in one place and I have access to something, and I go to another machine, a different endpoint that's configured different evenly, and I may not have the same access capabilities on that other device because it's not as secure. It didn't have its vulnerabilities mitigated. And for that device, I'm not going to have access to X. Now, what I would expect is increasingly we'll give feedback to users. You do not have access to this because of this endpoint not having the same security configuration as the one you were on last time you accessed. So, and by the way, there was a great comment that Zero Trust goes much deeper than just user access, but I'm using that as just as a use case to illustrate the difference for a user experience.
Okay. Paul, as a prior program manager yourself, I picked up on a theme in chat on funding, right? Are we seeing an understanding within the five-sided puzzle palace where the money, and in Congress as well, where the money really comes from, that funding these initiatives is important, and what programs put in their POM or their budget request? Are we starting to see any indication that those types of requests are being understood or supported?
Well, as a former program manager myself, I wished it was more mature than it probably is right now. I think this is very much going to be an evolving construct as far as how we in the program offices develop our funding requests, how we develop our budget estimates, how we develop our POM inputs. Right now, I would say my impression is we're still very immature in the Zero Trust realm because people are still working through what these capabilities are, what these capabilities mean, how they're going to implement them, and what the impact of them is. And then on the converse side, for years I worked really as a portfolio manager for OpNav, where I was responsible for explaining to OpNav, oh, these are the things we want to emphasize, these are the things we want to fund. So I would say that we're still immature in that area. I think that's very much going to be an evolving construct, but I would also encourage the program offices, if you don't put in your requests, you're not going to get the money. So we very much need to mature this. My personal experience has been when I talk to different programs, offices, COCOMs developing it, I think they could be more thorough and more comprehensive in the budget requests and the POM submissions that they're putting in. So I think that's going to be a huge area of evolution. And there are precedents other precedents like cloud migration, where for years I don't think we have put in a effective budget and POM requests, but we got much better over time. So very much the more we create a community of practice in this, the more effective we collectively can be in understanding how to do this. But that is an area of immaturity, JR.
So it sounds like might be a good practice to invite your resource sponsor or someone on the funding side of your program to get a little education in this area. So when they see those POM issues come in, they should at least understand what the acronym is, and a little fundamental aspects of it might be a good practice.
Well, that and I would also really go out with an outreach to the leadership in my program office, my PEO. I would keep and take contact with the technical director and the PEOs and the chief engineers of the acquisition commands, because this is really going to take a collective effort for us to really educate and get to the most effective and efficient way to do this. I mean, there will be significant costs for this, but there could be significant enhancements in our capability to handle threat and get to higher level mission assurance. So I think that this is going to evolve as we go forward.
Okay. And I guess it too, Paul, will the kind of a theme in chat about, what about my current accreditation? I've got this boundary set up and architecture. I think the comment from Gerald, thank you, Gerald Hirsch for servicing some of the questions in chat. I guess it's the castle moat theory that, hey, I'm inside the castle and I'm relying on other people's security controls to help protect my system. Sounds like that's kind of flipped on its head with zero trust. Will the compliance or the certifications evolve over time, or intended to evolve to kind of consider this shift of philosophy?
Absolutely. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to do a blend of what we're doing. We're not getting rid of perimeter defense, and that's why I wanted to have Director Borshine, the director for DoD CIO on architecture and engineering, for our guest speaker next month. But we're not getting rid of it. We're supplementing this. So just because we're creating this capability for our operation centers to better detect and counter potential threats does not mean that we've done away with perimeter defense. And what we're going to have to do is re-educate our information system security engineers, our information system security managers on what this means and how the controls that they've implemented are being supplemented with these capabilities and these activities. So that's why I keep coming back to this is very much an engineering and architecture activity, and this will truly evolve. And I see the question, is there a program office already doing this? We have the overall DoD CIO Zero Trust Program Office, which is doing a phenomenal job on helping us develop our guidance and overall objectives. But at an individual acquisition command, I haven't found anybody that's developed a program office just for zero trust. What I have found is really good engineering efforts that the chief engineers, the technical directors are putting out with guidance to their programs, because they better understand the context of their command, their systems, where they're at. So, there's very much going to be an evolution here. And this is going to be taking extensive effort of training, awareness. We also are talking about developing a zero trust workforce within the DoD. So, I mean, this is a multi-year effort, but this could significantly enhance our mission assurance, and especially if we have to go up against more advanced threats, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. They have some very good capabilities for offensive cybersecurity.
A couple of questions, Paul. I mean, you kind of hit on the one that was popping up time and again, was how all these things come together. If one program goes off and does one thing, there's unintended consequences perhaps on other things. So it sounds like we're going to be pretty methodical about, the order of operations here, or really understand the bigger architecture before someone goes off and does one thing that affects someone else that could be complementary or not towards their security posture.
Absolutely concur. So, a great starting point again is the capability roadmap that the DoD CIO has developed and the Zero Trust Program Office under the CIOs put out. Because there is a precedence, there is an interdependence between these. And the more that people understand these from an architectural and engineering perspective, the better chance they have of succeeding. So that's why it's so important that, we get beyond a compliance mentality. Oh, I'm going to check the box and I'm going to rush through and I'm going to say I bought this and I'm done with these capabilities. That we really understand what the capabilities mean to us. We really understand how the capabilities are enhancing our ability to handle more advanced threats. And the other thing too, when you really start understanding or looking at zero trust, what you get to is what I call dynamic capability, where you can change your policy and you could understand what effect it would have across your enterprise for handling or changing, adapting to a higher level threat on the fly.
Hey, Paul, thank you. A question just popped in the chat. I just couldn't help because I was recently exposed to Chat GPT. I keep messing up that acronym, like one of those progressive commercials, right? I feel like the old guy in the elevator. But what about AI, right? Is this going to make is that going to make this easier to some degree, or is that to be determined?
Well, okay, so there's a lot of great things that are occurring. And what you're seeing is one of our pillars and capabilities is automation and orchestration, and the other one is the better use of analytics. So when I get to my more advanced pillars, we are using AI. There is a lot of AI starting to occur as far as understanding what's occurring in your network, the movement of traffic between things, the sensing at an enterprise level, especially an operations level, how your security operations centers could see something, monitor it, and start saying, wait a second, that's unusual, that's an insider threat, or something that we need to effectively counter. So absolutely, it will go forward. The problem is people always hope this stuff is more mature than it might be initially. And I think that we're going to see a lot of evolution in this area with our capabilities, with our ability to, again, to handle, detect, and counter threat. But this is also where you have to be an informed consumer, because some of the vendors might over exaggerate where they're at and where it's at today. I see questions, a great question, Paul. Yes. Could this help with zero-day threats? Yeah, you could possibly. Again, what we're getting to is not just stopping something, or not just countering something initially, but how we monitor it so that it doesn't have the same effect on us. In the past, with our vulnerabilities and our exploits, when people got in, they were able to do a lateral movement. So the initial threat may not have been that bad to us, but when they got in there and they could do this, and then they could laterally move in our network and get to something else, then it had its serious consequences. But that would not be the only thing. So
okay. No, interesting. I think it sure seems like there's this new frontier, and I feel like Chat GPT can't do everything, but I think most of us have seen, some buzz of excitement and maybe fear about it. So thanks for addressing that, Paul. Couple questions or theme questions regarding system performance or concern of, hey, what will this do? Will it, make my system not functional where I can't meet mission in certain domains, or will it slow performance of the system down through seemingly new layers of security that weren't there before, that perhaps have been optimized in some way today that might be affected negatively through a future architecture? Are there controls in place to kind of ensure we're getting the mission done while we're fielding a new architecture?
Well, there's two parts to that question that immediately pop up. First of all, we have to better inform our users of what we've done, what it means, what effect it could have to them. The second thing is, when our users start getting impacted, the first place they turn to is our operation centers. So the most common thing we do is we've implemented something. We haven't informed the operation centers, our MOCs, our TOCs, our NOCs, our SOCs, I don't care which one, but we haven't informed them of what we're doing. But who's the first person that the user is going to call? They're not going to call the program office and go, hey, what'd you guys do? They're going to call the operation centers. And if the operation centers aren't aware of this, aren't aware of the impact of this, they get overwhelmed with calls, but they don't know what to do. So yes, it could impact us, but the first thing that we have to do is better educate our consumers on what it means, what it looks like, how this works. And then we need to make sure that we've talked to our operation centers, our MOCs, TOCs, NOCs, SOCs, I don't care which one you pick, of what we did and what this means to them and how they can help the user. So absolutely, that's why we talk about this being not just a technology implementation, that this is a cultural change. This is a change of process. This is a change of workflow. This is a change of ConOps. And you know, it's there's going to be a lot of impacts, and if we aren't meticulous in going through in implementing this, we'll have huge impacts to all of these other people that are responsible for our enterprise services. So I would hope if I'm at a COCOM and I'm an acquisition command, that whatever's occurring here on Zero Trust is being coordinated with the delivery, the maintenance, and the configuration of our enterprise services.
Big challenge, like you said. Hey, someone else just put in chat a question I jotted down for my own understanding. How or when is Zero Trust being integrated with our risk management framework, all of our compliance activities? Or are we starting to see some of these aspects of Zero Trust being integrated with those processes?
Well, the good news is yes. I would say it's starting. The bad news is it's not as mature as people would hope. So, and this will have to be our last question because we're coming up on our time. But, when I do Zero Trust, I can't do this separate from what I'm going to do from RMF or cyber resiliency or cyber test and evaluation. So that's why this has got to be an engineering and architecture effort. And whatever we do here has to take those other things into consideration. Now, I will tell you that, if I was in program office today, I've got 5 different things. I've got the RMF process, I've got cyber survivability, I've got cyber resilience, I've got cyber test and evaluation, and now I'm getting Zero Trust. So, it can be a little bit bewildering, but again, when you start doing this from a good engineering and architecture perspective, you start understanding how all of these different things can fit together. And by the way, I think that's where we at DAU can provide a significant source of relief and help, because as we see the best practices, as we see the lessons learned, as we understand how people have done this and navigated this successfully, we can help provide out that experience, that knowledge to others so they don't have to go through the pain and they can get more quickly to the efficient and effective effort. And with that, I think we're going to need to turn it back over to Christy, but there's a lot of wonderful questions, and this is why this forum is being created, is so that we can help you guys be more effective and succeed.
Yeah. Well, Paul, thank you so much for the time and for everybody's participation and questions. I think we're going to do our best to go back through the chat and service some of those questions. I think is the game plan. So thank you all for joining in, and we'll be back next month. I think Chrissy's going to tell us what's coming up next, and really hope you enjoyed today. Please take time to give us a survey. I think you'll hear that as well. There's some survey links in there. We like your feedback. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Christy.
Thank you for attending today. Please remember to access a short survey at the link we provided in chat. After the survey, you can request a certificate which you can use to request 1 continuous learning point for attending today. Follow your organizational guidance regarding requesting CLPs, and remember, CLPs for DAU events will not post automatically to your CL transcript and must be requested separately. A video of today's event will be available at the event page no later than Friday. Registration is now open for next month's Zero Trust webinar. Register now at the event page. Registration is now open for the 2023 acquisition update. Acquisition relevance. Go to the event page to register today. Join us on April 4th and 5th from 9:15 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time for the Zero Trust Symposium. DAU is much more than what you see in the classroom. We offer consulting, coaching, customized solutions, and executive support. Visit Consulting Services for more information. And if you have ideas for future speakers, send us an email to events@dau.edu. DAU offers a variety of open enrollment workshops every month. Visit the virtual campus to see available workshops and other events at dau.edu. We also offer a variety of online events every month. Registration is easy, just go to the events page and sign up today. That concludes today's event. Thank you for visiting DAU. Have a great day.